Back with another episode of The Crossover with your host, Ravi and B. This week, man, we're going to break that down. Two major topics, two major things that are going on in the Western Conference this week. First thing, the McHale firing in Houston. H-Town, what's going on? And part two, Clippers in duress, at least I would say at this moment here. Not the firing squad. We're not in panic, but a tad bit of duress early in the season with the Clippers. So, Ravi, we'll start with the Rockets first, man. What's your take on this McHale firing, man?
Man, I think honestly, looking at the situation, I think McHale was the scapegoat of the situation. Even literally right after he got fired, reports came out of the locker room saying a lot of the actual players had issues with Harden and Harden's attitude throughout the season so far. So, and I mean, I think there were some reports that came out where McHale approached Harden regarding his defense. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that conversation went too well. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at last year's postseason, I think Harden's defense. I mean, I'm not a big James Harden guy, but even I will admit, last year in the playoffs, I thought his defense, and throughout the season as a whole last year, I thought his defense stepped up a bit from what it, where it was.
He didn't have far to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, far to go.
There wasn't much lower he could go with it, right? So, but I thought he made a concerted effort to really change, the perception of him and his defense.
Right.
But I think at the start of this season, his bad habits, kind of reared its head again. And,
Maxwell, bad habits.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think McHale was scapegoated in this situation. I think if you look at it, I mean, I don't think any other of the major sports leagues. I think the NBA is the only one where the players, or the star players, I should say, really have the power to get rid of a coach, more so than any of the other major sports leagues. Yeah,
I mean, there's only 5 guys at a time can be on a court. The impact of 1 or 2 top players can have a huge impact on your team, as we all know. So therefore lies the power through the fact, in this case, the marketability of those stars compared to every other sport. And in that sense, the NBA is leaps and bounds. I mean, you go down to the 20th most popular NBA guy. He's probably more popular than at least about 99% of the athletes in every other sport.
Well, hey, I mean, when Rick Brunson played in Toronto, we know who he was, and he had a website, so that says it all.
Right. So, we know who, in this case, we know who they're dating and stuff like that. I'm not trying to say anything in this circumstance. The curse does seem to be applicable, but, there's extenuating circumstances on that, so I ain't going to go down that front with Harden. But I will say this. McHale, in this case, this smells and reeks of desperation. To me, this comes down to the fact that Morey, in this case here, has been playing pretty much, playing fantasy basketball and fantasy hoops, putting as many top-line name players he can find on the market and saying, here you go, without actually thinking, in this case, that the pieces really mix. So what I mean by that is, he had a team last year that had a nice combination of players, mixed together. He decides in this case he wants to upgrade his point guard position. He gets Ty Lawson. Now, if anyone knows hoops in this case here, I'm a North Carolina man. I know how Ty Lawson likes to play. He likes to play with the ball in his hands. Guess who else likes to play with the ball in their hands? One James Harden. So, you already create an issue now where you have 2 guys that want the ball, in this case, in their hands, and no one's really willing to give it up. So all the movement you had last year, kicking out for threes, that starts to die quickly. Howard starts getting frustrated because he's seen the ball in the post and stuff like that. Next thing comes into play in this case here. Harden's defense you mentioned before. I think Harden in this case got too gassed up over the offseason. I think in this case here, fine. He felt in this case he got a little job for the MVP. I must admit, if I had a pick, I'd put it on record here. I thought he should be MVP myself. You would say Curry. Hey, it's not one way or the other. If you took Curry, I ain't losing any sleep about it. If they had to pick Harden, I wouldn't have lost any sleep about that either. But I think somehow it's gotten in his head. He's been making comments all summer and the offseason and stuff like that about about the MVP, especially after the NBA had their own special awards and they gave him the award. So I think he felt justified even more so to say what he had to say. And I think in that case, it's like he forgot the work he put in to get that point to be considered an MVP candidate. Because all of a sudden,
I think early on in the season, you can tell. I mean, I think in the off season, he put more effort into his celebrations after making a basket, more so than his defense.
Right, and when it's all said and done, the Olay Matador defense memes are popping back up again. I saw one the other day there where he just went coast to coast on him off of a rebound. Now, the third component of this whole thing comes down to you kind of touched on it, the Harden demeanor. Now, this was always hard to judge, and I don't really try to play pop psychologist and these type of things. I always feel like, you know what, unless I got proof of it in this case here, but there was something I found very telling last year in the playoffs when they made their huge comeback against the Clippers, and he was sitting on the pine as it was happening. And when they cut it down to 15, he's still sitting on the pine. They cut it down to 12, still sitting on the pine. Just watching, not really getting rooting together. They get down to single digits, and he starts kind of rustling a little bit. By the time they get to about 5 or so, he finally kind of says, hey, well, I'll join the team in this case here. Then me, I said a whole heap of stuff going on there with that team and with him and his relationship with that team. And I think when it's all said and done, I think it's frustrating on the players. It's frustrating for a guy like Howard where he's looking around like, what the heck? Every time he looks around, someone's blowing by him in this case here because he's cover up for Harden's deficiencies and some other guys on the team. It's not just all Harden because there's some other guys in this case here that, they always say this about Reza. Reza's always good at the beginning and end of a contract. Middle years in. Yeah. Now he tries so first year of the contract, Reza's guns are blazing. Last year the deal with Washington, it was sweet. When you get the middle years, it gets a little lean in this case here. Now I ain't saying his numbers, and the thing is the numbers don't look different. It's more the attitude and the body language. But anyways, Houston I think will right the ship, but in the West, which seems to be a bit weaker, they have a shot, obviously, it's still early to get back in the mix and get in the playoff mix. So I think it's a panic move by Morey. I feel bad for McHale. It leads to a bigger issue a little bit to the whole thing, analytics versus basketball experience. That's also playing into this. Where it's like McHale is kind of old school in that sense. Morey wants to have everything is analyzed in this case where a ball should be and a shot should be at this time in the second quarter with 6 minutes left to go into the half. It's like micromanaged to a T. So it's like it eventually was going to blow up, I think. But anyhow, man, Houston's situation is something to watch. Watch that, man, and keep track of that, folks. Number 2, the LA Clippers. Your favorite boy, you got 2 of your favorite subjects here today, boy. Harden and the Clippers. Good Lord, it's like Christmas came early for around here.
It's never a dull moment in the City of Angels, Brian. So this one's been building up for a while now.
Oh, it has ever.
It started up after they gave up a 23-point lead. And I lost to Golden State.
I was talking about this game with fellas today, guys. I was listening to the Simmons podcast from on Friday talking about this, about just the. Yeah, go ahead, man, because I found it fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's been a slow build.
Yeah.
They last week in a huge game, national televised game, they gave up a 23-point lead to the Warriors and came back and lost that game. Sunday, again, the Raptors built up a 29 first half lead.
Yeah, I still didn't feel it was safe. That's Raptors pathos kicking in there. It still didn't feel safe.
And they ended up losing that game 91-80. They lost 7 of their last 9, lost 3 straight overall, and now they're sub 500. They're 6-7. So reports after the game was that Josh Smith and an unnamed Clipper coach, not Doc Rivers, and one of the assistant coaches, they got into it pretty heavily.
Shocking. From Detroit, we say hello.
So nothing came out in terms of what they were actually arguing about.
Yeah.
Those specifics surprisingly have not leaked. But I think Blake Griffin, he's made some comments saying the team has to come together. Guys gotta start playing together. So there's a lot of unrest over in LA because I think it's like 4 straight postseasons they haven't made a conference finals. There are a lot of expectations on this team, and they failed to deliver within the last 3-4 years. Well, I think especially ever since Doc has taken over as coach and GM, I don't think he's some of the additions he's made has been very questionable, especially if you look at the small forward position, because if you look at the last 3 finals MVPs, well, what position is that?
Yeah.
It's all small forwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got Iguodala, you got Leonard, you got LeBron. Take a look at the Clippers small forwards in the last few years.
What Pierce is? Pierce at about 40-something years old, ain't cutting it for you.
Well, I mean,
and Pierce is sitting there looking. I saw Pierce at the bench, and the Raptors game just had this look like, what the heck did I sign up for, guys?
Well, hey, I mean, funny enough, Pierce is the ideal guy. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Not now.
But I mean, they've had guys. I mean, they've had Grant Hill at the end of his career. They've had Hito Turkoglu. I said that Hito Turkoglu.
Never forget Mr. Barnes. They've had tons of people. When it's all said that, it's been a turnstile from the small forward position.
That's it. Yeah.
But let me get in on this for a second to say this part. I would say this.
Come get some, Brian.
Exactly. Here's my thing. Okay, I'm laying this a little bit, man, because, I mean, he's been the Teflon Don for a while. Everybody loved Doc. Everybody never got anything bad to say about Doc. Media loves him some Doc. I'm not going to go in you. Let's just go back to the coach he had before, Del Negro. Mm-hmm. If Del Negro had 2 playoff seasons just fall apart the way these last 2 years for the Clippers, he would never get a coaching job again. He might not get one now in this case here, and he had a 55 winning team. And I'm sitting there going, the mental collapse against Oklahoma City, and then what we saw there against Houston. You're up 3-1 in the series. You're at home to wrap up. You're up 20-some-odd points.
Unbelievable.
And you let Josh Smith light you up from 3 of all places.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show how much one championship how much equity it can buy.
Well,
that was in 2008. He's still living off that.
True, but it also was.
I mean, he's like the Jamie Foxx of the
I mean, the Clippers have 2 things going for in this case here is not good. They have some sacred cows in this case, Doc being one, and we already know about Chris Paul being the other. Because in this case here, Chris Paul on his end, for a guy that's a top-line player in this case, I've never seen a dude collapse in tight positions. True, he hit the game-winning shot against San Antonio. He's fantastic there. But a lot of times, I find he gets so intense, things unravel in this case here because he's too he wants to win too much. He doesn't know how to let that type of energy go or find a way for it to flow positively, and it ends up just being, I'm gonna take over the world, or it just disintegrates like how it did in Oklahoma City, where he just falls apart. And I think listen to Simmons' podcast the other day talking about how Pierce were trying to get the guys together. Because Pierce they say, dudes, what are you panicking about? If you look at a team, they got a lot of dudes in that team in this case here that when things get tight, folks start to walk. I mean, you go Stevenson. You go, Stevenson. Who else you got in there, that team there?
Well, you got Stevenson, you got Smith.
Another dude. I mean, even Jordan, guys that just, when the moment gets tight, guys like, well, I don't want any part of that. Even Blake.
I think with Jordan, you already know there's some anxiety issues there if the game is close in the fourth.
You can't play him.
You can't play him.
You can't play him. It's useless. It's such a flawed team, and the window, like in my mind, like I don't even know what you can do to fix it because I think they have so many systemic issues that I don't think you can fix it just with just one move. Everyone always says when in doubt, they say, okay, make the trade for Griffin. But in my mind, it's like Griffin's true, Griffin's got his own issues, but he's the one piece I would want to keep the work around.
Yep.
At this point, like, why would I want to trade him? I mean, I would trade Jordan, where he's flawed. In this league now where centers need to be, he's mobile and stuff like that, but where, center doesn't need to be that effective. In this case here, that you need to have a guy paying that much. I mean, Chris Paul's at 30-some-odd years old. How much longer he got to play? I mean, you trade him now. There's a lot of dudes in this case here, like, J.J. Redick. If I shoot her anywhere and things like that. Do I really need to pay him like $10, $11 million? Yeah. So, I mean, to me, Griffin's the least of the problems in this case. But the Clippers are fascinating. This story, oh, jeez, I tell you, I can't wait to see how this is going to play out by Christmas, man. We'll see how this goes, man. This is going to be fun. I'm going to leave it at that, man. Anything else you got to say on that?
Hey, man, that's a wrap, man. We've given them enough airtime for the week.
Oh, boy. We won't get into Kobe saying that stranger things have happened in this case. Leave that alone.
Well, hey, man. That's a low blow, Brian, because by the time we finish this podcast...
I would be down by 40.
By the time we finish this podcast, the Warriors will have won 17 straight. That win counts for 2 tonight.
Oh, man. And on that note, man, you can find me at Beyond Locker Room, short for RM, and working the good folks by you, Ravi.
You guys can find me on Instagram at Ravi Narayan.
He's going Instagram, baby, IG. All right, man. We'll see y'all next week, man. Take care.